55,000 Royal Air Force bomber aircrew killed, nearly half of everyone who served. These were supposed to be the safest seats in the war, promised as an escape from trench slaughter. Instead, surviving just 30 missions was deadlier than the Somme. How did strategic bombing become the most lethal job in World War II, and why was the cost considered worth it? The answer lies in the math no one wanted to face. Official doctrine. After World War I promised a new kind of war, one waged from the sky, not the trenches. Policy papers spoke of precision, of breaking enemy resistance without the endless bloodletting of ground assaults. The architects of strategic bombing believed high-altitude bombers would deliver victory with fewer casualties. But Arithmetic told a different story. Bomber Command required crews to complete 30 operational flights to finish a tour. Each mission carried its own risk, calculated and recorded. The average loss rate stood at 2.2% per sortie. On paper, that seemed manageable. In practice, it meant that fewer than half of all crews could expect to survive a full tour. The odds worsened over Germany, where the loss rate climbed to 5.1% per operation. Even before facing enemy fire, danger lurked in the classroom and on the training field. From 1939 to 1945, 5,327 men died in training accidents. Some courses lost a quarter of their intake before graduation. The numbers stripped away any illusion of safety. Surviving 30 missions was not a matter of luck or skill alone. It was a confrontation with cold probability, repeated night after night. The promise of a cleaner, safer war faded with every completed sortie, replaced by the relentless math of attrition. Lancaster and Halifax bombers carried their crews in cramped, unarmored hulls, 7 men each with a job and a fate tied to the machine. The odds of escape, if hit, were brutal. Only about 15% of Lancaster crews managed to get out alive, and only 25% of Halifax crews managed to get out alive. For most, a single direct hit meant the entire crew died together, sealed inside a burning aircraft at 20,000 feet. These were not isolated tragedies. The design left little room for error or egress. Hatches jammed, fire spread fast, and parachutes were useless if the plane broke up or spun out of control. Survival depended not just on luck, but on navigation and timing. Pathfinder units led by Don Bennett faced even longer odds. 45 operations were required for a tour, not 30. They flew ahead to mark targets with colored flares, using new tools like H2S radar and oboe navigation. H2s let crews see ground shapes through clouds, while oboe used radio signals from England to guide bombers in the dark. These innovations narrowed the bomb pattern, but also made Pathfinders prime targets for German defenses. Night fighters such as the Bf-110 and the Ju-88, equipped with onboard radar, prowled the bomber streams, hunting by instrument and silhouette. Each new British device triggered a German counter, and every raid became a contest between invention and interception. For the men inside, the machinery of war was both their shield and their trap. In July 1943, RAF bombers unleashed a new weapon over Hamburg. Strips of metal foil, codenamed Window, tumbled from thousands of bomb bays, confusing German radar and leaving searchlights and flak gunners blind. That week, 2,300 tons of high explosives and incendiaries turned the city into a furnace. The firestorm swept through entire neighborhoods, consuming oxygen and pulling people from shelters into the open. Official records counted 42,000 civilians killed. Around 250 factories were destroyed, and nearly 1 million residents fled the ruins. The scale of destruction stunned even British planners. For the first time, strategic bombing achieved both industrial paralysis and mass civilian casualties in a single blow. A Hamburg survivor wrote in a diary days after the raids, "The air was full of ash. We could not find our house. My mother wept for the city, not just for us." Hamburg proved that the theory of air power could be made real, but the price was measured in tens of thousands of lives and a city left unrecognizable. On the night of March 30th, 1944, the numbers turned lethal. Bomber Command sent nearly 800 aircraft toward Nuremberg, expecting another grinding raid. By dawn, 95 bombers failed to return. The loss rate reached 11.8%, the highest for any operation in the entire campaign. Nearly 1 in 8 crews vanished in a single night. In squadron logs, names were crossed out and replaced. Replacement crews, fresh from training, filled the empty slots by morning. Some had never flown over Germany before. For these men, the arithmetic was unforgiving. At this rate, survival over 30 missions became a fantasy. The base roster shrank overnight, and the faces at breakfast changed. One navigator on his second mission wrote home that the bunks around him emptied faster than he could learn new names. Nuremberg made it clear. Bomber Command was bleeding faster than it could be replenished. The mission lists grew longer, but the odds of surviving them collapsed. Berlin absorbed more bombs and more lives than any other city in the campaign. Over the winter of 1943 to 1944, Bomber Command lost 1,047 aircraft on Berlin raids alone. Loss rates hovered near 7% for each mission, an arithmetic that meant hundreds of crews vanished into the night, month after month. The city's vast defenses turned every operation into a drawn-out battle of attrition. Anti-aircraft guns, night fighters, and searchlights ringed the capital, waiting for the sound of engines in the dark. Arthur Harris, Bomber Command's chief, insisted that Berlin could be broken. He wrote that it would cost us from 400 to 500 aircraft, but it would cost Germany the war. The reality was harsher. The losses doubled his estimate, and still the city stood. Yet the raids forced Germany to commit nearly 1 million men to air defense, flak crews, spotters, radar operators, and support staff, men who could not fight in Russia or prepare for the Western Front. Each bomber lost over Berlin drained both sides, but every gun and every fighter kept in Germany was one less facing the Allies elsewhere. The cost was staggering, but so was the diversion of enemy strength. In July 1943, Royal Air Force bombers struck deep into Germany, targeting airfields and aircraft factories just days before the Battle of Kursk. Over 500 Luftwaffe aircraft were destroyed or grounded in these raids, leaving the German Air Force depleted at a critical moment. Soviet pilots at Kursk found the skies less crowded with enemy fighters, and the balance on the battlefield tilted in their favor. Bomber Command's campaign forced the Reich to defend its own airspace. Every 88mm flak gun stationed in Hamburg was one less gun facing Soviet tanks on the steppe. Leonard Cheshire, who completed more than 100 operations, later reflected that the real impact of Bomber Command was measured not just in destroyed factories, but in the resources Germany could no longer send to the front. The attrition in the West gave the Red Army breathing room in the East. For the men flying these raids, the link was stark. Their survival odds plummeted, but so did the Luftwaffe's ability to contest the air over Russia. A 5.1% loss rate over Germany meant that every night, crews faced odds that made survival a matter of arithmetic, not heroism. Completing 30 missions required luck that most would never see. The math was relentless. At that rate, only about 1 in 5 crews could expect to finish a tour, roughly 21%. The rest joined the roles of the missing, the dead, or the captured. The first 5 missions were a trial by fire, with inexperience compounding danger. The last 5, when the finish line was in sight, became known as chopping block trips. Crews avoided counting down aloud, wary of tempting fate. Yet the war demanded more. Bomber Command flew 1,536 sorties, dropped 2.25 billion pounds of bombs, and destroyed 8,325 German aircraft. By June 1944, the focus shifted from city centers to tactical targets, including rail junctions, coastal batteries, and communication lines, clearing the way for the Normandy landings. The scale was staggering, but for those inside the bombers, each mission remained a solitary gamble against the numbers. 80 years later, strategic air power remains central to military doctrine, often justified as cleaner, more precise, less costly. Yet every new campaign still weighs lives against objectives. The arithmetic of war never disappears. It just waits for the next generation to trust the numbers. What would you risk?